Hey friends, I'm Greg Nettle and I serve as president of Stadia Church Planting, where our vision is to make sure that every child on the planet has a church. We do that by helping you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation. I'm really excited about this episode of the Church Planting Podcast because my good friend, dear friend, Mindy Caliguire is joining us. Mindy serves leaders in soul care all around the world. She is personally invested in my life and in my own soul care, and she serves on the Stadia board. Mindy's authored multiple books, but I'm really excited about her forthcoming book, Ignite Your Soul: When Exhaustion, Isolation, and Burnout Light a Path to Flourishing. And so I have an advanced copy that I'm reading right now. Can't wait to get through that one. Would you join me in welcoming my friend, Mindy Caliguire? Welcome, Mindy.
Thanks, Greg. I'm delighted to be with you.
We've already been chatting for half an hour, and I just thought we probably should get to the podcast. I always love catching up with you and bouncing ideas around and different things, and so appreciate over the years your work with Stadia. I meet with you quarterly for my own personal health, which, I think for me is the biggest endorsement I could give to you personally as far as soul care. Your soul care initiatives at Stadia, we're raving fans and send people to you all the time. So thank you for all that you're doing in the arena of soul care and beyond.
Well, thank you, Greg. And it's my deep heart. It's my own way of life, but it's so delightful to be able to come alongside the jet fuel drinking leaders like yourself who are called to great things and say, how do we surround leaders really well so they can run hard, do the things that God's given them to do, but stay grounded and deeply present and able to navigate. So delighted.
Okay, so jumping right into this topic, and I'm talking to a lot of leaders these days. How do we lead effectively through now what's going to be politically charged months and potentially years ahead of us?
Yeah.
And one of my big things that I'm trying to bring to awareness, as I know you are, is a lot of us have, we've come out of the pandemic, one of the most challenging leadership times of all of our lives, and we're all like all we want to do right now is catch our breath and go, huh. And yet I was with Ed Stetzer a couple weeks ago, and he said he believes the next 18 to 24 months are going to be some of the most difficult times that any of us have ever led through. And I'm going, oh man, how do we lead this? And what are your thoughts on that, Mindy?
Yeah. Well, first of all, the thing that strikes me as you say that is, isn't it interesting that 4 years ago, like right now, I don't know when this will come out that folks will be engaging with us, but right now for you and I, this is the middle of February, end of February in 2024, and March of 2020. So literally 4 years ago, this time, none of us had a clue what was coming. None of us had a clue. Some of us might have been a little bit going like, hey, there's something going on over somewhere else in the world. Maybe that'll matter. None of us had any idea what was about to happen to our world. Unlike that moment, we right now know, we don't know the outcomes. We don't know what's coming specifically, but we know that some of the most major disruption, as Ed Stetzer is saying, some of the most major disruption in our lifetimes is coming. And so it gives us a different vantage point from which to say, well, then what does it mean to be prepared for something we don't know? And actually what's coming to mind, I don't know if this is accurate. I don't have enough military background, but how they train Navy SEALs, because they got to be able to drop into a situation and make stuff happen for the good with a foundation level of physical training, emotional training, psychological training that allows them to navigate whatever they're about to encounter. Because I'm kind of going off of things I've seen in movies and read in books, but that's the moment we're in right now, is we have got to train at that level our interior worlds, our relationship with God, relationship with others, living out of a true self, not our false self. These are the things that are going to allow us to land on the ground, parachute in wherever we are, and actually have the presence of mind, the connection with God to navigate, because you cannot put a strategic plan in place right now for what's coming because we do not know.
So Mindy, so last May, you're very well aware of this. I was worn out. I was tired. My marriage was my relationship with my wife had cracks in it that need working on. I was just empty. And, graciously, our board at Stadia, I had 5 weeks off and was able, Julie and I did really hard work on our marriage. I did a lot of
Yep.
soul inner work depth and came out. I feel healthier now than I've felt in a long, long time. Right.
Yep.
But I was thinking about it. If this May I was at that point that I was last May, that would not be good heading into this next season of leadership. And I guess I want to make sure our leaders, our church planters, our church leaders, our business leaders out there, like if you're tired right now, if you're empty right now, look, that needs to be a huge warning signal because I'm afraid you're going to go up like tinder in a fire as we head into this next season. And that's no good. So, Mindy, let's talk at a real practical level over these next few months. If
Yeah.
people are experiencing that, how can they prepare
Yeah.
for whatever this next leadership onslaught is going to look like?
Yeah, it's really about restoring the foundation. It's making sure that you are on stable enough territory on the inside that you can withstand the expenditures that we know are coming. And I think your example, Greg, is a really practical way that anybody can, I mean, thank you for your authenticity, for anybody can come to that point to say, I got to take an honest look inside, guided by the Holy Spirit, not some like interior witch hunt. Nobody needs that, but does allow the Lord to invite you in to what's really going on inside. Like, can you face the fact, are there some fractures in some key relationships, a spouse, a child, where, or a coworker, a trusted advisor? Like, are there fractures that once you put enough weight on this will not withhold the pressure? So are there fractures? Are you running on reserves that you're just going through the motions and it's not going to sustain you when additional pressure gets put onto that thing? You think of the integrity of a bridge. I think I've used this illustration in some places before, but the integrity isn't just about like, am I telling the truth or whatever? Minimally, of course, but when you talk about structural integrity, the integrity of a foundation, the integrity of a bridge that you can cross it, structural integrity is a different kind of thing. Structural integrity allows something to hold weight, and leadership has a weight, and that's not bad. That's what we're made for. But if you do not have the structural integrity, and then when we can look ahead, we don't know what additional load is coming on, but we know additional load is coming in the next 18 months. Do you have the capacity to hold additional weight? And that's where, if you're not willing to pull out a flashlight and look underneath and be like, all right, where are there structural fractures? Where is there deficit? These are going to come into significant importance over these next months. And so the first step, you've got to be willing to take an honest look inside. Where am I vulnerable? Where am I holding stuff that if a certain kind of pressure came onto this, it wouldn't hold? And this is where we got to let go of our illusions of grandeur and that we're all that and all that. Like, no, I'm sorry. We've all seen enough headlines, I hope. We don't need more headlines of who had to get booked into like somebody was texting me earlier this morning. It's like, we got to keep these pastors and leaders out of rehab. And I was like, or let them get there sooner without a crisis. Like whatever is needed, right? Whatever is needed. He wrote back, he's like, LOL, yeah. And it's like, if you need rehab, by all means, go get it. As if your very life depended on it. Because it does. And your calling and your leadership and your family. So we have to, as the writer of Proverbs said, above all else, guard that interior place, your heart, because everything you do flows out of that place. And it's hard to look at.
It is, Mindy, but I respect leaders that will go through the hard stuff, that will get the help they need. Sometimes we feel ashamed about that stuff. And for me, it just makes me so proud of leaders who walk through that
Yes.
stuff and who are willing to
Yes.
own it and say, hey, I'm in trouble, or my marriage is in trouble, or I've got this relationship with my kids, or I'm dancing with the devil here and it's no good. And you own up to it and you watch them walk through it. And I go, yay, God, and yay, you. And I respect you more and I love you more, if that's possible, than I did
Yeah.
even before,
Yeah.
because you've owned it. And so I guess that's a great place to start, Mindy, is just to say, hey, if you're in a place right now and you need some kind of rehab before you get back in the race here over these
Mhm.
next years, get your tires changed now. Now's the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. And I think I'd like to also see us as the whole Christian ecosystem, right, of leaders move from a crisis mitigation. Like, if you need rehab, by all means, go get that. Like, now, like, don't even listen to the rest of this podcast. Like, hang up your phone and do what you know you need to do. But let's move out of crisis mode and into, how do we have a vision for what I'm starting to call soul care as a way of life? How is soul care your way of life, so that you are receiving what you need from God in the midst of your labor, and not like drive. Oh, I'm almost going to crash. Well, then I go and get 3 months here or 5, sessions at a thing that's intensive. And I love those. I've done those intensives. Again, I respect that. I think it's a vital component. But I would really love that we would get on the preventative side, not only the crisis intervention side. Both matter. And if you're in a crisis, deal with it. Deal with it directly, strongly, the way you would if there was a crisis in your organization. Deal
So,
with it,
Mindy, I'm
confront it.
thinking about these next 18 to 24 months and the political climate and election and all
Yep.
this stuff. And I'm thinking, you know what? I, as Greg now, as a leader, I want to thrive through this. I don't want to
Yeah.
just get 2 years out and go, okay, I made it through. I want to go, you know what? I led well through that. I'm healthy. I feel
Yes.
close to God. My marriage is strong. Let's talk some real practical ways, because I think as
Yep.
leaders, we really want that. But what are the
course.
practical things right
Yep.
now that we can start to go, okay,
Yeah.
this is going to help me thrive over the next
Yep.
18 to 24 months?
Yep. And for sure, everybody should know, if you want help, our team is right there ready to help. But there are lots of good providers that can walk with you through that vision. So first of all, you got to decide, is that what you want? Write that down. What would that look like? If I led through the next 18 months in a way that I looked back on and said, this was some of my finest moments as a leader, what was true of me? And then how do I move toward that? Okay, so I believe that some of the answers to that would be, I was grounded. I was living out of my true self. I wasn't reactionary. I had creativity and imagination, and I could hear the voice of God through that time. Those are the things that like dry up in an instant when we're succumbing to the level of stress and extraction that we can't continue to produce from. So my little page person in a plan. I'm going to keep going back to this. You got to have somebody or somebodies who are walking with you through that. Isolation in leadership is one of the most deadly realities. And we're surrounded by people and people who love spending time with us. But does anyone know the good, the bad, and the ugly? Is there somebody who is for you, who's not one of your board members, who's not one of your employees, not your family? Who is it that maybe you pay them? They're a coach, they're a therapist, they're a spiritual director, but you have got to have regular connections, not when I'm spinning out, I need that person. What is the intentional, proactive way that you are connecting with a person who helps you stay connected to your true self, asking you good questions? Like, there are some people that I just get together. I was on a call earlier today with an advisor, and I was like, I have a couple things I think I need to talk about, but like, I kind of just want you to ask me questions. Like, and we need to be held in those kinds of relationships in order to bring our best leadership forward. Okay, so that's one thing, is the person part.
Okay,
The
hold on, hold on.
page.
Before you
Oh,
leave that,
yeah.
I can't let this go because I don't want to lose this. I think this is okay. So let's project ourselves 24 months into the future
Yep.
and
Yep.
say, okay, looking back, what do I want my last 24 months to look like?
To have been marked by. Yep.
Through this segment. I think that is genius question that you asked there. And I am making commitment that I'm going to spend time this week thinking about that. Okay, because I'm going, oh man, I think I'm going to need to build some extra margin into my schedule these
Yes.
next 24 months.
Yes.
Because what's going to happen is normal life is I'm still going to have some challenges with my kids. We're going to have some financial issues. We're going to have marriage stuff. My
Yep.
parents aging, all that's going to happen. The problem's going to come is that margin's going to go away that I have right now because of the stress of what's going to happen culturally. And all of a sudden, I'm going to find myself going, oh, I'm underwater. And so
Yeah.
if I can build margin into my schedule right now for the next 24 months, that's going to help
Yep.
me thrive.
It will. And the only way you'll hold that margin is if you have a deeper yes inside of why you're keeping it, because everything will come to threaten it. And so that's why this is one of our gifts as leaders, right? We're good at casting vision, seeing into the future a little bit prayerfully, but start doing that for your own life. You know how to do that for your organization, but do that for the kind of leader you want to be 2 years from now. What is that vision? What vision do you have for yourself? How did you navigate those things? What were the markers of that? Those are great questions to sit with. And I'd love to hear what you come up with, because those are really
see.
important. Those are really important. So I'm kind of weaving together these different things of the page, the person, and a plan, and answer to the what do we actually go do. I want to back up to the page part of this framework. You've heard me say this before. I have come to believe that everyone's leadership capacity for influence is capped at their capacity for self-reflection. That is a big idea. It comes out of a lot of research. Our capacity for influence, and therefore, if you think about who do I want to be over the next 24 months, I want to be somebody who's influencing for good. I want to be somebody who is contributing to what the world needs, not another, spinning out noise in the machine. How do I become a person of influence during this time? How do I retain influence? Our capacity for self-reflection and commitment to it is a vital contributor to our ability to lead from a place of wholeness and strength. Now, self-reflection is a hard thing, especially now if gender norms are true. It's harder for dudes, generally speaking. This is on my report. This is not my observation, but can be harder. It's definitely hard when you're living at Mach 5 and you don't have the time to sit down, physically pull out an empty journal and go, all right, what is banging around in my head today and why? What does that mean? What am I thinking about? What am I worried about? What do I actually see, but I don't want to admit that I see? All those kinds of reflective questions. What is the Lord doing in me? Where do I feel convicted lately? What am I doing about that conviction? These are the kinds of questions that we have to create space for if we want not only to live more whole and healthy ourselves, but I believe this opens the gates for levels of influence because we're more self-aware. We're more able to operate out of not quite so reactionary. So that framework, I think you've heard me talk about, it comes from an author, Janet Hagberg, who wrote The Critical Journey, which is well known in many spiritual formation conversations about the stages of faith and sort of the ways people get stuck. But this other book is called Real Power, and she outlines these stages of how personal power shows up in the context of organizations. It's a brilliant work. She would identify that powerlessness, power by, what's the second one? Power by association of who I know or who I've worked with, whatever, is a different way of influence. Power by position is sort of what Western worlds think of it. Well, it's my title. It's my, how much money I make. It's that. How many people do I lead? But that is the increase of power. And then the highest levels of influence actually come from our capacity to give away power. This is counterintuitive to sort of Western thinking. You're going to love this. So power by position is that maximum, and that's not wrong. We have to be able to operate in that in order for leading organizations and stuff. But we don't want the only reason people listen to us to be because we have a title.
Right.
So there's powerlessness, power by association, power by position. Power by reflection is this next stage. And that is a vital increase of influence beyond one's position. We must go there if we want to increase our influence and be able to contribute more to the world around us. Then there's this lovely thing called the wall, which is the point we get to when we're confronted with, frankly, the death of our ego. And that, for us to get to the highest levels of influence globally, that ego will always fight for self-preservation, but it must die if we're going to move to the highest levels of influence, which is power by purpose and power by wisdom. So anyway, this is a whole separate thing, and we didn't need to talk through that whole thing. But I believe, back to our little tiny framework, that leaders, if you want to navigate this next season well, you have got to build your capacity for reflection. Whatever helps with that. Journaling practices, different people do it in different ways. There is some neuroscience around the benefit of physically handwriting. But if that's unavailable to you or for whatever reason, don't stop building capacity for reflection into your life. So that's the page piece.
Okay, so we've got the page, the plan, the person, and we need to be working through all of those right now and thinking back, what do I want to look like 2 years? And that's going to help us thrive these next 18 to 24 months.
It will. It really will, because it'll cause you to solve for, like, you don't solve a problem until you see a future. That's where the plan comes in. It's like, what is that future that I want for my own soul, for my life, for my leadership? What is that? Not just what do I want my organization to achieve? That's good. You have a plan for that. What do I want the plan for my soul's well-being to be? What would that look like? I don't know if you've seen it, Greg, but we have this whole resource we create called really help people create a soul care plan that is for like a whatever scope of time. But I like to think of it in like a 90-day cadence. Every about 90 days. Well, we talked about it a little bit over our quarterly meetings. What is the thing I'm putting in place? The trellis is the rule of life is the old term. The regula is the structure. Rule doesn't mean like the speed limit rule. Rule is regula is the Latin word for the original rule of life, and I'm air drying a trellis. That's what that interpretation of that word is a structure that is inert. It is not the same thing as growth. It doesn't cause the growth, but it holds firm in a world gone mad and becomes something that our lives can kind of wind themselves around. You can think of certain kinds of grape plants, different flowers that you might have in a garden or whatever, things that, even cherry tomatoes, right? Things that have to grow on a structure or they will not optimally fruit or flower. And that's how humans are. If we don't have a structure to grow on, we don't optimally produce. And so we have got to have a bit of a structure to kind of wind our lives around. If you've ever seen these vines that like grow around a trellis, they're just amazing how they like curl around it. Like they are, by God's design, they are made to twist themselves around something firm. And that is how our souls are. We twist ourselves around something firm. Now, the thing, whatever structure it is, like you talked about building in margin, or a practice of a spiritual direction appointment, or any number of whatever the structure is, and it changes over time, and we have to be adaptable and flexible in this. but we require structure in order for our lives to be optimally fruitful.
Okay, so just to bring this, kind of put a bow around it a little bit, because I'm learning from you as we go here, and I hope everyone's learning from this conversation. But so I'm thinking, okay, if Greg Mino looks out at the end of 2025, and I'm reflecting on the previous months and the journey that we don't know exactly, we've agreed upon, we don't know exactly what's going to happen in this politically charged year, but we do know something's going to happen, and it's not going to be easy regardless of what the
Yep.
outcomes are. And so looking back, I'm looking at what do I want my spiritual abiding in Jesus life to look like at the end of 2025? What do I want my thriving marriage to look like at the end of 2025?
Correct.
What do I want Stadia that I get to lead to look like at the end of 25? What do I want my relationship with my kids to look like at the end of 2025? And then to look backwards and put the plan in place to actually be the trellis, if you will,
Yes.
the regula that I'm going to build on so that I actually arrive at that place at the end of 25.
Yeah. Yeah. We can do this. We absolutely can. And Jesus's people have been doing this for centuries. That rule of life concept is very ancient. Like, there are rules of life that were basically of and especially when it gets applied not only in an individual context, but in a community context. I have yet to be part of that. I may someday. Our organization has had like early stage thinking about that. And really through Soul Care, we're starting to build a bit of a collective rule of life, monthly retreat, time for spiritual direction, pausing during seasonal parts of the year for different kinds of reflection. So we're sort of finding our way into it, but I haven't been part of some of the things like the Benedictine rule of life. And some of these things have been around I think that one dates back to the 4th century, Greg. That is still an alive, active thing that people who are part of that community, that becomes part, and it does impact all the things that we were talking about. It impacts how they think about wealth and how they think about vocation and how they think about relationships, and shared, like, fixed hour prayer is a part of that. Like, there's all different kinds of things that none of them are the point. The point is that it is a structure that we wrap our life around.
So I'm thinking, Minnie, this is a fascinating process here. So like I'm thinking about our micro church that Julie and I are part of, and I'm going, man, this is a conversation we should be having together at our micro church level. At the end of 25, what do we want to look back on and say, wow, this helped us to thrive through this, so that as we're sharing life together in community, like you're talking about, we're helping each other over the next months on that journey.
Isn't that the most fundamental purpose of our communities? Isn't that what we do? Is we create relationships and intentionality around a shared life with God. And if whatever organizational, structural shape it might take, microchurch, megachurch, anything in between, that's the whole point. What does it mean to be a community of people with God at the center who are asking themselves and each other, what does it mean to live out the message of the gospel in our context here and right now? What does it mean to live out the life of God? What is it? And it doesn't matter what structure or format you're in. I was at Ben's church just last week. I love the big resource mega churches that are doing things that a micro church can't do. And I love what a micro church can do. That is a totally different thing. It's all the forms, doesn't it make sense that the God who created, I don't know, a bazillion different kinds of fish, there's creativity and beauty in every different expression, but they all should be asking and answering the same question of what does it mean to be the people of God connected to one another in a local context. Even in virtual spaces, we can ask and answer that same question. And what does it mean to be a people with God at the center, as our source, as our life, as our joy, as our worship, as our praise, as our gratitude, and to live out the energies of the kingdom in our context. And with that, we will close. Mindy Caliguire, Soul Care, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for giving us your time today and cutting into your margin. I so deeply appreciate you, Mindy.
Oh, Greg, this is a joy. It is a joy. I always love to serve with you and for you. So until next time, I hope to see you soon.
Thanks for listening to the Church Planting Podcast. The Church Planting Podcast is part of the Stadia Podcast Network. To find more great episodes and to see how Stadia can help you start thriving, growing, multiplying churches for the next generation, be sure to check out stadia.org/podcasts.